psychotherapist Dr. Richard Hogan. Good morning.
Good morning, Brendan.
And Richard, we'll always have guilt and shame. So we're going to talk about guilt and shame today. There's a lot of it about, is there?
Good Irish pastime, isn't it?
Yeah. Is there a lot of it about? Yeah.
Is there a lot of it about? I think it's probably singly the biggest thing I would deal with, clinically speaking.
Is it?
Because it has its tentacles in everything. You know, it has its tentacles in parenting. Mothers feel incredible guilt. That's what I would say a lot about having to work and not being around their children as much. You know, there's guilt in your relationships. There's guilt in, it's in everything. You know, it's got those tentacles into everything.
Okay. You say as well it's that any deviation from the norm causes guilt and shame.
Well, you see, it's rooted, it's evolutionary. These are not just random emotions, and they're not just like today's problems. These are deeply wired social emotions that were designed to keep us connected so that we could navigate our social groups healthily and in a successful way, right? Okay. So think about that as the group, right? And so the group would have its norms always, and those norms are shifting, as we know. I mean, what was causing guilt 4,000 years ago mightn't be causing guilt today, or something different is causing guilt today because of the social norms. So yeah, once you're outside what is considered the norm, you can feel incredible difficulty.
It's keep us in line.
Yes, that's exactly what it is. It's a relational repair system. So it's designed, really, when you think about what guilt is, it's based on behavior. Oh no, I did that. And the brain, which is interesting, is the crazy thing about the brain, is not good at time mapping emotional memory. So you could think about UCC 30 years ago, like I'd be random Monday night sitting down, my face goes red, and thinking, I shouldn't have said that. You know what I mean? Yeah. So you live out a 30-year-old memory and yesterday's memory are quite similar because, again, like you said there, it's designed to make you kind of stay aligned to your values, to your principles. So there's an educational part, there's a corrective part in guilt, which is really important for social bond, social contract. You know, I think we're probably living in a world today, without getting too political, where some of our major leaders are shameless and guiltless. And we see what that's doing for the the socialness.
So it has its uses.
Absolutely.
And come here, you say as well, people mightn't be aware of this. Guilt and shame can be a big problem for neurodivergent people as well.
For sure. Because think about, Jesus, Brendan, this topic actually kind of makes me a bit emotional. I tap into myself as a kid. I think any of us growing up in the 40s, 50s, 60s, I grew up in the 70s, late 70s in school, 80s school. I think what you heard there, you know, was particularly problematic for developing shame. Right? I had mild enough dyslexia. I don't even know why I put the mild part in there, but there's some shame for me to say that, right?
Yeah.
I had mild dyslexia growing up. I felt completely outside what would have been accepted as the norm. Now imagine an autistic child in there, someone with dyspraxia, dyscalculia, dyslexia in there, and the system is telling you have to align to the system. The system isn't trying to reorient itself to meet your needs. It's telling you that your needs are actually outside what the system wants. So there's something wrong with you. And I would say, you said to me, is this a big thing that's struggling? This is the roots of so much life. Unhappiness, because you develop paradigms about yourself. You're not enough. You're not worthy. You're not good enough. You're not normal. Right? I mean, God, I felt that with dyslexia. You're not normal. You're outside the norm. There, you don't read as fast as your brothers read. You don't spell as fast as other people read. And then I loved writing, and I loved writing poetry, and I was pretty good at it and all that. So there's frustrations then. Give me a pen, and my head is ahead of the pen writing. Give me a laptop, and I can fly along with it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so when you're a kid growing up in the 70s or 80s, and you're outside the system, that stuff creates paradigms that are destructive for life. Like
he or she is weird. Remember, that was one of the worst things you could say about somebody.
Weird, odd. There's something wrong with them. A want in them. You know, there's a want in that fella.
Okay.
You know, there's something different. That difference, we're not good at difference, right? I think we're terrible at difference, and that stuff is what creates these paradigms that destroy a child's soul and turns into an adult that probably detaches from their emotions.
So you mentioned there the national pastime.
Yeah.
Are Irish people particularly like world champions at guilt and shame, yeah?
I think we are. And as I analyse, I think often cultures that were oppressed, you know, the Maoris and the Native Americans, they lean into alcohol, they lean into substance like the Irish would lean into because of shame, because of guilt, you know, because of like that idea of having your culture erased and that kind of stuff, and your identity so quickly erased and all that. I think it is and then religion of course is in here, and some of the stuff that it might say to us about original sin and guilt, and in my my fault, my grievous fault. And so when you're a kid, my daughter's making her communion currently, and I can hear her trying to figure out what's my sin. What have I sinned?
So we're all dirty fundamentally.
I think we're programmed very early on to feel that we have something to really apologise for.
Yeah. In other words, sorry is our kind of national greeting for everything.
Sorry about that there. I was born.
Yeah. Okay, so guilt and shame are two slightly different things on the continuum.
Yes.
So what is guilt, and what does guilt feel like?
Yeah, guilt. Well, we all feel it. As I said, they're evolutionary. We all feel it. Guilt is rooted in behaviour. So why did I say that? Why did I do that? Right? I shouldn't have said that. So it's about misaligning ourselves with what we feel is like, what we want to be in the world and how we want to show ourselves in the world. And who is aligned to that all the time? No one. And so that's what guilt is designed to kind of go, you shouldn't have said that.
Okay.
Right? And so it's corrective. It's good. It's actually healthy. So, now, two things I want to say there around that. On last Wednesday, I had an argument with my daughter and I overreacted to the argument, right? And when she went off to school, I was sitting there guilt-ridden about the argument. When she came home, I had a conversation. And I apologised. I said, I shouldn't have reacted like that. Just bad moment there. I'm sorry about that. And I apologised to her. That's one bit of guilt. And it was corrective and it healed. And I said to myself, I don't want to feel like that again. People will always say,
okay,
I don't want to live with that guilt. So that's good. You don't do the behaviour, right? And I always think about that if I do something that I'm not really happy with. Do I want to feel that for hours again? So that's corrective. Okay. Now, when my youngest daughter was born, she had an illness called transient neonatal diabetes. Okay. Right? It was 6q24 chromosome, right? I remember that old chromosome very well because it was my fault. Okay. Right? And I remember coming home from the hospital, I had like tears in my eyes and I was like berating myself that it was my fault. I had given this to her, made her life struggle to start with, and I felt this incredible guilt and shame. And so that's not helpful because that wasn't actually anything I had control over.
Okay.
That was unintentional. That was nothing I actually had control over. And so we can feel...
We're so hardwired that even things that aren't our fault...
We take them on. But geez, kids who... I made this in my clinic. Kids have an incredible ability to feel guilty about their parents' conflicts. They blame themselves for them, and particularly a collapse of a relationship. They will blame themselves for that. What did I do there? As a person who's experienced a really terrible sexual assault will often come back and blame themselves for it. Maybe I shouldn't have gone out. Maybe I shouldn't have done that. Maybe if I didn't walk down there. They're misplacing their guilt on themselves. They're internalizing it. So we have a terrible tendency to turn it inwards. To misplace it. So there's healthy guilt where it's helping you to correct and kind of think, I won't do that argument again. I won't overreact like that. I don't say that. I won't do that. That's okay. That's good. And then there's the guilt that is actually all encompassing and enveloping.
And is looking for stuff basically to beat yourself up about.
It is to be like a penitential. It's looking for yourself, to whack yourself and say, look, there you are. You're not good enough. You're not that valuable. That's because you're this. And that's where it moves into the kind of the shame realm.
Okay. You said there about the little thing in UCC 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Guilt can be like massive things or tiny little things. They seem to have equal weight when you're beating yourself up, don't they?
It's like gravity where you throw the feather down. They both go down the same speed, right? Yeah. And so you might have desperate guilt about like leaving someone unread in a WhatsApp message or whatever it is, or the old, my daughter had a temperature last night, I couldn't make it, lads. We all do those little white lies to get ourselves out of the social contract.
Yeah, but you could get yourself in a right spiral about it. If you're in the mood, like
you could go down that and say, I'm a terrible person.
Yeah.
Why would I do that? You're just a terrible person. That's the brain is designed. Like, that's the unfortunate part of this incredible machine we have. It's not really designed for you to go, Brendan, you're just a great guy. It's looking for problems for you to resolve. And so it's looking for, you did that to that guy, you shouldn't have done that to him. That's terrible. And that's where it likes to go with it. And so you just got to get better at kind of like figuring out what is guilt that's healthy for me here, what's outside my control the controllables and leave the uncontrollables alone.
How might we start working on that useless guilt?
Again, it's about thought. There's neuroscience behind this. We have about 70,000 thoughts a day, and a lot of, like 10% of those are only original thoughts. So we're just thinking in neural circuit loops. We're just going around and around. We might be thinking a negative thought, a guilty thought for like 30, 40 years, and we might live it in the present. And I would say the most important thing there, if you learned this, it's like neurons that fire together, wire together. What you need to do here is like observe the thought rather than react emotionally to it. When you react emotionally to a thought, you're feeding it, you're pouring fuel onto the thought. And so when the thought comes in, you kind of have a bit of levity with it, right? You're going to go, there you are. Why would I think this now? That's weird. That's funny.
Okay.
I'd always be saying, and I'm always doing that with people, helping them to kind of, don't take your thoughts so seriously. And when a guilty thought comes in, just think about all the social construct, all the weight of what's in that thought, right? And then kind of maybe have a bit of levity with it. There you are, I see you. And maybe have a name for it and let it pass. And I guarantee in about 2 weeks, that thought will stop firing because you haven't reacted to it emotionally.
Okay.
The emotional reaction.
You're not trying to
suppress.
Engage
No,
no. Right?
It's not combative.
Yeah.
Jeez, that's what people make a mistake.
There you are.
That's it, because that's what TikTok will do. That's what TikTok will do to you. You can fight. You can do this. And it's like, no, that's not how you deal with psychology. That you're going to go, there you are. You're welcoming. You're actually, what you're doing there is you're incorporating it into your system. You're saying, I know you're there. There you are. Oh yeah, I've seen you before. Oh, that's funny that came up now. And you're being a bit of levity around it. And I guarantee you, it stops firing.
Okay. And you're robbing it of its power.
You're taking out all of the power out of it.
Yeah, and laughing, as we know, laughing at something.
Because that's telling the body everything's okay.
Yeah, okay.
You know what I mean? And if I think this guilty thought, you could see this in an fMRI. If I think a guilty thought and I laugh or I change what the guilty thought means, the guilty thought just disappears.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's incredible
so
stuff.
if you have in the family, say we'll start with partner, maybe if the partner is prone to guilt, anything you can do to help.
Well, that's what I would be that little bit there, but also I'd be trying to help them out. You see, when you say don't have, you shouldn't have guilt about that.
Yeah,
it's like, it's not very helpful. Another layer of guilt. Now I'm guilty that I'm having these guilty thoughts, right? Okay. And so it's like, no, try to think along. I'd analyze. Well, what is it that you're feeling guilty about? And did you have control over that? And was that something that you should be guilty about? I just ask it questions. And maybe you need to get a bit better at filtering out what I have control over and what I don't have control over and what I didn't do. And so I shouldn't feel guilty about that. And just get a little bit better when those thoughts creep in, because they do. Generally at nighttime, 10:30 is when those guilty thoughts come along, right? We're lying in bed and 3 areas of the brain come together and they whisper things to you. I can't believe you said that.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's wired in.
That's wired in there right at the end, just before sleep. Remember, you're lying in bed. You say, I don't think you're that. You're going to get found out. Right? You don't have a restful sleep after that. You have rumination and misery sitting there while your partner is off deep in sleep, and you're thinking, I'm going to get caught for that. I shouldn't have said that. That's the brain. You got to get better at understanding that bit. Breathing exercises before sleep is what I always do. My brain is flying away all the time, and I'm trying to get it to calm down. So breathing exercises, and when the thoughts come in, I just kind of go, there you are, and I let it pass, and I just get a better relationship with it so that I'm not scared of those thoughts. They're integrated into the system, and they're there, okay, but they don't fire so much.
No, look, a lot of us might feel guilty that we're passing on kind of subconsciously guilt habits to our kids.
We are, to be honest.
Okay.
To be honest, we are.
Okay, how could we be more
labels don't
aware and
the
mindful of that?
Like labels don't predict the future, they write them. And, they don't. They absolutely write them. And parents can often, language is so important around this stuff.
Okay.
And parents often, I would say, my experience working clinically, guilt their children and make them feel guilty. And they place the locus of the child's misdemeanor, right, inside the child firmly. And so you're a bad, you're worse than, you're so difficult, you're just, right? And so what I'd always say to parents, the best way to move outside that is to move it towards a behaviour. What I always do with my kids, I'd say, I don't know why you choose that behaviour at that particular time. What's that about? Did you get what you wanted from that behaviour? And they'd say no. So would you think doing more of that behaviour gets you more of what you want or less of what you want? And again, less of what I want. So why would you choose that behaviour? Now I'm giving them agency over their behaviour, but I'm not placing the locus of it fundamentally inside a child. The child is bad. That's where you're lazy. These labels that we got thrown as kids, they're lazy, he's the bright one. That bright one can be a real problem of guilt and shame for a child, because then you're not living up to
It's all on them.
It's all on, and that's perfectionism. A lot of this is rooted in disordered eating. It's rooted in obsessive behaviours and all that, because you feel like there's something fundamentally inside you that you can't really control, and so you can bloody well control this part here.
Yeah, okay.
Right?
Okay, so basically that's stopping the guilt from metastasizing into shame. And
exactly.
Just before we get on to shame, guilting people, which is something everyone's at it, it is quite, it's low level passive aggressive manipulation.
It is.
Any strategies for people guilting you? I think ignore it is
parents are
great. If they want to say it out, say it out.
Say
but otherwise,
it.
if you're just half saying it, I'm just going to ignore it.
I would try to translate it. You know?
All right, yeah.
So what you're saying is...
okay, yeah.
So what you're saying is I never do anything for you, is that it?
Yeah.
You know, I can't ask you to do anything. There is a little bit of low-level coercive manipulation.
So call him out.
I'll do it myself, right?
Okay.
I said I'll do it for you, but I can't do it right now. So can you just like give me whatever it is? You know, I'd call it out. So you're showing someone that you understand their low-level manipulation here and their attempts to guilt you. Just name it a little bit rather than saying, causing a fight.
So shame then. So shame is internalizing the guilt and metastasizing it into yourself, yeah?
I think we all live with shame that we don't even understand, to be honest. You know what I mean?
Non-specific kind of shame.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's in us. It's bred into us for all different kind of reasons. But I kind of go back to that idea. If there was a difference, or your family, or how your family spoke to you, how the school spoke to you, how your friends, all of this stuff writes the paradigms that you live with. And so, what I meet a lot in my clinic is boys who feel so shameful about their size, right? Girls who feel so shameful about their beauty. I find myself so angry with these ideas, right? Because they're being foisted onto them through social media, the comparison, all that stuff. They've always been there.
The boys' version of the good-looking.
It is. Yeah, absolutely. And did you see the
like too short, too small?
Yeah, too small, not strong enough. Did you see the manosphere with Louis Theroux?
Yeah.
Right, you know what I mean? And so you can see what these guys are feeding on.
Yeah.
You know, you can see what the revenue model is, feeding into boys' insecurities around their size and being able to kind of talk with girls and be, attractive to girls and all that. That's all the rage bait, clickbait. It's all about engagement. Louis Theroux didn't really fully understand what he was doing, I didn't think. You know what I mean? He didn't know what he was dealing with. You could see him thinking, well, who the hell are these guys, right? And all they
it was better than I thought, though, actually.
I was just a bit disappointed with it. Yeah, but
and then with girls, it's about their looks these days,
It's about beauty standards. And it's about academic performance, I think, for a lot of people as well, particularly maybe more girls at a younger age. But beauty standards, for sure. The ideas around perfectionism. And I would meet this, like shame now, Brendan, like shame. Sitting in my clinic, a girl would say to me, I don't really like this eyebrow. That one's okay. But and I'm looking at kind of going, did you ever think about your eyebrows as a thing? Did you ever think about when you were growing up as a kid that your earlobes were a thing? Or were you analysing the minutiae of your face as a kid? I don't think that was in our consciousness at that particular time of growing up and maturation. But by God, it's in there now. So and they feel shameful.
Is feeding shame hugely with these
kids,
yeah?
Absolutely. And what I'm always trying to do when I'm talking to them is I'm at pains to show them these are social constructions, right? When I'm in the Philippines, being white is seen as desirable. When I'm in Western Europe here, when in Europe here, fake tan and brown is seen as desirable and all that. And so those two things are just a particular part of the world, making girls feel miserable for how they look. And the more miserable you are, the more shameful you are for being white or for being brown or whatever it is. When they make you shameful about that, you're more likely to be vulnerable to being a consumer. And so all they're trying to do is gear kids up to buy Solid de Janeiro, make them shameful about their skin at 8 or 9 years of age, that their skin isn't perfect. The skin is a bloody organ. It's constantly changing and growing and shedding and moving. No one's skin is perfect, but they're making them feel shameful about that. And for boys, they're making them feel shameful that they're not muscular or big or strong or like the fastest or the best at rugby or the best at this. So they're constantly judging themselves against kind of an incomprehensible marker of perfection, and they're always finding a deficit. So there's this incredible simmering shame.
And shame is much more corrosive than guilt, is it?
Well, guilt has got kind of like a purpose, really, and guilt can be helpful and corrective and all that. Shame is just rots away at yourself. And shame is in secrecy. Like I never said I had dyslexia growing up. Never said it to anyone. I only said it publicly in 2021. You know what I mean? Yeah. That was shame. And when I wrote that article, the amount of people who wrote to me and said it to me, you know what I mean? The amount of people who wrote to me. I remember one GP came into me and he said, my God, he said, your article, what a relief. He was in his 60s. He was like, what a relief. I've been holding it my whole life like a secret. And people can feel incredible shame about their sexuality, because when the social norm is that the Holy See doesn't condone sin or bless sin or whatever, and society is out there saying things about these things, and then you internalize that, and you don't even.
And how does that play out in people then? If someone is crippled with shame, like how is it going to present, like psychologically, emotionally, and stuff?
Well, depression,
anxiety.
Anxiety is a huge player in shame, right? And that's perfectionism, but also addiction. And then if you throw in, like, say, a bit of divergence in, like, ADHD in there, where someone has, like, a brain moving kind of quickly, that's a hypercritical voice. And so you're highly in tuned to how people are perceiving you. And, like, for years, it was kind of funny. We were joking, myself and my wife, if Bank of Ireland would ring me and say, can you give us the IBAN there? I'd be like, oh, shite. Because I would get stuck between the I and the one and the I and the zero and the O. Yeah. And I'd be kind of going, it's either an O or a zero. And I could hear the girl going, what? You don't know what a no or a zero is? I'd get those kind of things confused, right? And the shame after the phone call, my wife would laugh at it, whatever, we'd joke about it. But the shame I'd feel for a long time after that, profound, to be honest.
In the body.
And it would make you kind of hunch over a bit. It would make you smaller. Like, it would make you smaller. I could see people in my clinic literally physically kind of trying to disappear. They come into the clinic and they'd say things like, nothing ever good happens in my life. There's a profound, statement about, like, fatalistic idea about your life. And so they're shameful about themselves that nothing good happens to them. Not like the other people's lives that have all these brilliant lives. Nothing good happens in my life, right? And when I trace that back, through a genogram, whatever, I see a paradigm of a kid sitting on his chair, on a seat, maybe on the step, waiting for his dad to collect him, or whoever, parent or guardian, and they didn't turn up, they were inconsistent. And I see the kid constructing a very destructive paradigm. Don't expect anything good to happen, because if you do, you're only going to be profoundly left out.
And also, I don't deserve it.
I don't. Well, there you go. The next step is I don't really deserve anything good to happen to me, because, and then here comes the shame. I'm whatever it is, the paradigm.
Bad.
I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy of love. I'm not valuable enough. I'm actually not a valuable enough person for someone to actually turn up in time and bring me out and to be there at the match and watch me. Okay. Those are terribly destructive things.
So a lot of it goes back to
it's all in those roots, like those early roots.
So how do we? What are strategies? So for like it sounds like shame is very well dug in.
It's dug in. It is. Yeah.
What are strategies for working through it?
And I think a lot of it might be even more subconscious than we'd like to know. Than we'd like to think it's there. It's happened, and we bury it down. We suppress it and all that.
Okay. So the first step is to know you are.
We all are.
Shamed. We all are. Right.
We all feel shame. Right, like I said about the big things, the small things, we all feel shame, right? And we all feel guilt and all that. The first thing I would do is try to kind of really tap into what are the things I feel shameful about. What are those, right? Write them down, because a lot of these things, when they're going around in rumination, Brendan, and they're going around in a neural circuit loop, that's unprocessed emotion. And you're not processing, it's just going around and around and around and around. Do you ever know when you're lying in bed and you're ruminating, like nothing gets processed? I'd always get up and write down so I can see my brain kind of goes, oh, that's what I'm thinking. And then you can get a bit of rest because you're trying to process it, right? I'd write them down. And then I try to identify which ones were my behaviour that led me to feel shameful about that, and which ones were completely and utterly nothing to do with me. Relationship, parents separating, whatever it is, affairs, whatever it is, nothing to do with me. I have to free myself from that. Dyslexia was nothing to do with me. I have to free myself from that. And you have to sit down and kind of work those through. And have those kind of moments where you kind of go, that was mine, I did that, I shouldn't have done that. I would rather that behaviour was better for me. But we're messy, and we're all messy, and we make mistakes. So a bit of compassion, we're messy, we make mistakes. Shouldn't have said that. Give yourself a break here. Try not to say it again, right? There's the corrective part. That's what it's about. Try not to say it again. Daughter annoys me. Try not to get too annoyed about it again, because you don't want to feel that, right? And so that's the corrective, healthy part of it. And then figure out what's not my shame, what's somebody else's shame here, and have compassion for yourself for experiencing that, and that you should never have felt ashamed about that in the first place.
Okay.
And try to move it.
And writing it down.
Writing it down is really helpful.
Getting it out.
Processing it, yeah. Because it's like when you get into a conversation with someone, I never know which way this conversation kind of goes, right? But it's so cathartic because so much stuff comes out. You know what I mean? So when you go to write and you go to kind of let you don't know what's going to come out. It just comes out, it starts coming out, and that's why going to therapy is really
so you're
helpful.
Actually bypassing thoughts in a way.
You are
writing down, it's
exactly.
a direct line from the body.
I think it is, to be honest, a direct line to something deeper.
Okay.
Meditation can be really helpful for all of that stuff too, but I think therapy, a really good therapist, can really help you to mine into some of that stuff that you don't. And the moments in therapy when people go, oh my God, I never realised it was that. It's brilliant because you can see something kind of moving, something dark that was oblique in some ways, moving to some kind of like light and moving out of them so that they have freedom to kind of like begin to kind of move without all of this shame and guilt that swamps all of us.
So you mentioned the secrecy thing. Is that moving it as well from secrecy into...
Like that doctor who came to see me that time.
Whole light of day, like where it's actually the monsters aren't that bad.
The worst thing here is that, this is what happens, I think, particularly in adolescence, but the worst thing here is that we all think we're the only ones going through something. And we're the only, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're the only ones who's experienced this, so there's something wrong with you.
Okay.
Isn't there incredible moments of when you kind of you hear someone else go, I've dealt with this and that was a difficult moment and I managed it, and this, you go, God, yeah, that's how I felt at one point in my life. Right, so you're not utterly on your own with this, and you're not weird, as you said that word, because that's a word I hear in my clinic every day. I'm weird. You're not weird, and I challenge when I hear my daughter say that's a bit weird, or I'm horrible at this. I always challenge those words. I say, what's weird? What is
language is a huge part of this.
Yeah, okay. Absolutely. Yeah. For shame, particularly.
I saw somewhere that if you have one person that you could tell anything to,
it's so important.
It's actually a kind of a cure for shame.
That one
the worst of you, you can say it to someone and they're not going to judge you.
And I hope we all have that kind of friend where you can have a bit of crack about it as well. Like, the reality is this thing is so absurd, and our behaviours at times are so bizarre and contradictory and conflicted to our ideas of who we want to be. And so laughing and a bit of comedy is really important in all of this too. The ability to laugh about it, is really important.
Just before we leave it, shame has become a verb now as well, to shame. People shaming other people, public shaming, all of that.
Terrible stuff.
Strategies for dealing with that?
Well, I think we're kind of moving out of it, thankfully, and it reminded me there, and I wrote columns about it for years. It reminded me of Salem. There was no manoeuvre to kind of say anything that might be anyway not exactly fitting into what the narrative or the thoughts were. And I think we all have to get a bit better at having compassion for us, that we all make mistakes, and there's room for forgiveness here. Again, I always go back to that. There's room for us to say something that we don't actually believe, or that we say without. What I'm thinking here is I've worked with so many kids who down in the pavilions playing rugby have said something silly.
Okay.
That we all said at 15, and someone's recorded it. Now, this is the world our kids are living in. And now that's a kind of it looks like a kind of a stamp on who they are. But it was a moment of just impulse and poor judgment and just saying something as a kid. And I think we all have to work at that particular piece, talking to our kids about recording each other, disseminating information about each other, and also understanding that what we say in the moment doesn't actually define who we are. What we do defines who we are, not what we say, and all that. And so that's something I think we need to talk to our kids about, but also ourselves.
Okay. Yeah. It's funny, a good few texts about people talking about school in the 70s, 80s.
It was the breeding ground.
Simple throwaway things from teachers who had a million other things in their minds, who didn't have other strategies and everything. Then there's my life is ruled by guilt about the way I raised my children. I've so many regrets. I have a troubled daughter. Too ashamed to go to counselling. This person. Anyway, damage is done. But you're saying the damage is not done.
The damage, no. And, I suppose what guilt is about is trying to figure out about an apology and correcting something.
So making amends is
making amends is
really
important.
It's an old-fashioned notion.
And if that's knocking, if those feelings are knocking, I would say don't be shameful of therapy, because therapy is a non-judgmental space where you go in to unpack all that's going on in your life. And we've all made, your therapist sitting there has shame and guilt also. So we've all got it. So it's like, sit down there, try to unpack it, try to talk to your daughter, try to make amends, try to express your regret about some of the parenting styles that you used at that particular time and how you've grown.